When Denzel Washington walked into the hearing room, no one expected what would happen next. Not the cameras, not the lawmakers, and certainly not Will Smith. What began as a spotlight moment for a Hollywood redemption story unraveled into a reckoning no script could control. By the time Denzel reached for the microphone, the nation wasn't watching a celebrity. They were witnessing something far colder, the quiet collapse of a lie. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The room was already standing when Will Smith entered, not out of protocol, out of anticipation, out of narrative. He walked like a man who had been forgiven in prime time and now returned to tell the world how redemption is built. His suit was textured, navy blue with soft undertones of violet under the lights, the kind of color that says rebirth. His smile didn't reach too far, just enough, just controlled enough to be humble. The mic on his table was custom, sleeker than the others, with a foam tip branded subtly with the retreat's logo, "Rise with me." As he moved through the chamber, reporters angled for shots. Staffers leaned slightly forward. Phones raised not to document, but to preserve something that felt orchestrated. A congressional aide nudged her colleague and whispered without looking away, "He's really doing this. Right here, right now." Her tone wasn't impressed. It was rehearsed awe. And still across the room, Denzel Washington didn't rise. He sat at the end of the panel, no paper in hand, no nameplate gleaming. Just a manila folder at rest and two fingers tracing its edge like he wasn't waiting for anything. Like he had already seen this play before. His eyes didn't follow Will. They didn't blink. They didn't register applause or presence. They locked onto a space just beside Will's shoulder, not the man, the shadow he brought with him. Will finally reached the seat prepared for him. He didn't wave, didn't scan the room for allies. He simply sat, exhaled, adjusted his jacket, and let the room breathe him in. The chairman began his introduction in the tone reserved for those whose celebrity outweighs their subject matter. "We are honored to welcome Mr. Will Smith, artist, author, humanitarian, and co-founder of the Rise With Me Foundation, whose work in post-pandemic trauma recovery has been recognized across this country." Will's smile didn't move, but his eyes did. They swept softly, acknowledging without connecting. He reached for the microphone with a grace that said, "I've done this before. I know where to pause. I know where to place weight." He hadn't spoken yet, but the crowd was ready to feel something. A few seats behind Denzel, a reporter leaned closer to her producer and whispered into the mic clipped at her collar. "Isaiah still hasn't come home since last month's retreat, right?" The question didn't echo, but it hung. Denzel's head didn't turn, but his thumb stopped moving. Will adjusted the mic and cleared his throat. It was soft, rehearsed, like the start of a sermon, not a speech. And for a brief second, there was a flicker in the back of the room. A teenage face, black and white, in a photo someone held too close to their chest. The cameras didn't catch it. But Denzel did. Still, no one noticed, because Will had started. He thanked the committee. He spoke of the pain he carried, not just from his own life, but from witnessing what so many youth had endured in silence. He spoke of noise and chaos and a world without fathers. He spoke of the slap, but not directly, just enough to acknowledge failure and claim evolution. "I was broken," he said, but the breaking wasn't the end. It was the blueprint. That line landed like music. A congressional staffer nodded slowly. A woman near the front wiped a tear. Will looked down, measured, took a beat. "We started Rise With Me not to fix kids, but to remind them they were never broken." His voice was velvet and pain braided together. He was the prodigal son turned shepherd, and the room had already begun writing the next headline, but Denzel still hadn't moved. The silence around him was unnatural, not resistant. Not cold, just deeply still, like someone holding their breath through a storm only they could hear. His hand rested now, palm flat against the folder, unmoving. His eyes never met Will's. They were locked not with anger, not with judgment, but with something quieter. Memory, calculation. Will paused, glanced up, and for the briefest flicker his gaze passed over Denzel's face, not seeking connection, just brushing the surface. He looked away quickly like he touched something too cold. Outside the building, a siren passed. Inside, the silence returned. Denzel blinked once, nothing else shifted, but the room had already started to divide itself, not along party lines, along something else: conviction. Will inhaled, lifted his hands, and said, I am not here to prove I've changed. I am here to prove change is possible. Another round of nods, another moment of theater mistaken for testimony. But in that stillness, in the fourth row, a woman clutched a piece of paper folded in four. Her eyes never left Denzel, and neither did the question no one had asked out loud. Where is Isaiah, and why hasn't Will mentioned him once? Will's voice softened as he spoke, like a man peeling back the layers of a past already sanitized by the media. He didn't mention the Oscars by name. He didn't need to. The room carried that silence for him. Instead, he said, I made a mistake that played out in front of the world. I let pain speak before I did. That sentence landed like confession and poetry wrapped in silk. A staffer near the aisle typed the quote into their notes, underlining it twice. Will paused. His hand hovered briefly over the microphone as if unsure whether the next sentence was his to say. Then he went on. That moment changed me. But I didn't let it define me. I chose to rebuild not just my name, but my purpose. Because when you lose control in front of millions, the only redemption is to help those who have never had a voice to begin with. Cameras flashed. The gallery leaned in. It was the kind of line that would play well in reels. That would headline digital covers before sundown. Will's face glistened, not from sweat, but from the kind of tears that arrive right on time. He let them gather, then caught one on his finger, looked at it like it carried history, then smiled faintly. I found healing, he said, by helping others heal. That's what Rise With Me is. That's what this work is. Helping kids become more than what broke them. The room stayed silent, not reverent, not skeptical, just suspended, because the words felt beautiful, too beautiful, and then one voice cut through. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It didn't belong to the chairman or the press. It was Denzel Washington. He didn't raise his head. He didn't shift his tone. He just spoke. Do you remember the name of the boy from Inglewood? The one who cried in the clip you opened your retreat with? Will blinked. Not fast, not shocked, just slow. Like the question wasn't unexpected but unwelcome. Like a door he had locked was suddenly ajar. Aide number 3 on Will's left glanced sideways. Another staffer tapped something into a tablet. In the back row, the woman clutching the folded paper leaned slightly forward. Will adjusted his posture. I've met hundreds of young people through this work, he said. Their faces stay with me. Their stories, too. Sometimes the names come later. Denzel didn't respond. He didn't nod. He didn't fill the silence. Instead, he reached down and placed a single photo on the table, face up. It was a still frame, low light, the kind of image taken from a paused video rather than a posed portrait. A 16-year-old boy, dark hoodie, eyes red, cheeks wet. His head was resting against Will's chest. Will's arms were around him, face tilted down with the practiced warmth of a man who knows how to comfort on cue. The photo wasn't blown up. It wasn't highlighted. It was quiet, small. The kind of truth that doesn't need to shout. The room shifted, not physically, emotionally, like gravity had moved 2 degrees to the left. Something that had been floating just out of reach was now pressing gently against every chest. That boy's name was Isaiah. Denzel said it softly, like a name remembered, not discovered. Like someone who had whispered it into silence and now spoke it for the first time in public. Isaiah James Tucker, born February 21st. Inglewood, he was a guest at your March session. Day 3, Hour 4, breakout group labeled Path to Light. You gave him the mic. You cried with him. You called him brave. Will's fingers curled slightly against the table's edge. Denzel let the silence return, not to control it, but to make space for what was next. We've seen the clip, Denzel said. Millions have. It played on Good Morning America. It was shared by your foundation, edited beautifully, scored with piano, your voice layered over it. You said this is why we do this. Do you still believe that? Will looked up just slightly. His lips parted but didn't speak. He glanced at the chairman, who didn't interrupt, not out of respect, but uncertainty, because something had cracked. Not loudly, but undeniably. The photo still sat between them, a line of memory in a room built on perception. Denzel leaned back in his chair, but his eyes didn't leave the photo. His hand stayed near the folder, still closed. Still resting, but the weight of it had shifted. And for the first time since Will had entered the room, the light didn't feel like it belonged to him. It just felt bright, too bright, like it had turned from spotlight to interrogation lamp. And somewhere in the back of the room, a page turned, quietly, deliberately. As if preparing to answer a question no one had dared ask until now, the photo remained untouched on the table between them. No one reached for it. No one dared. Its presence had redefined the space, not as a hearing room but as something closer to a memorial. Will had stopped speaking, not because he had finished, because there was no script for silence like this. No cue for redemption when the story was no longer his to tell. Denzel finally moved, not abruptly, not dramatically. He opened the manila folder as if it were sacred. From inside, he removed a small device, a projector no bigger than a wallet. He pressed a single button, no announcement, no warning. The lights dimmed slightly as the screen behind him lit up. At first, nothing but a map, digital. Neutral, the city grid of Los Angeles, then a dot. A pulsing blue circle labeled Isaiah J. Tucker. It blinked steadily in Inglewood, then moved. The animation was slow. A path appeared. Isaiah's phone left his home at 7:41 a.m. heading east. It reached the retreat center at 8:23, then a pause, 4 hours of stillness, then movement again. The dot shifted south, then inland, then stalled. That final signal came at 2:12 a.m. The following morning, an unmarked intersection near the edge of the desert. No subsequent data, no call logs, no location pinged since. Denzel didn't narrate. He didn't need to. The room inhaled as one, then held it. A congresswoman near the edge of the panel leaned toward her colleague and whispered without lowering her mic. "That's not a return route. He never went home." Another member scribbled something onto a yellow pad and underlined it twice. The screen faded to black. Denzel powered off the device with quiet finality. The silence that followed wasn't the kind meant to be broken. It was the kind meant to be respected. Felt. Denzel spoke. He's 16. He doesn't have a driver's license. He wasn't scheduled for pickup. He wasn't enrolled in a follow-up session. His mother was told he needed time for extended healing. He looked at Will. She was told not to worry. Will's hands were now folded, fingers pressed together tightly. His lips moved, just barely, forming a word no one could hear. Maybe it was a name, maybe it was just noise. From the back of the room, the sound of movement, not loud. Just enough to shift the air. A woman rose. She didn't ask permission. No one stopped her. No one even tried. She wore a plain gray sweater and jeans too neat to be new. Her hands shook, but her spine didn't. In her right hand, a piece of paper. Folded, refolded, worn soft at the corners. The cameras found her without instruction. She looked not at Will, not at Denzel, but straight ahead. "My name is Michelle Tucker. I'm Isaiah's mother." She unfolded the paper slowly, the way you open something that has been touched too many times to remain intact. "This was the letter he left for me, before the retreat." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "It says, I don't know what I'm supposed to become. They say I'll feel lighter, but I already feel like smoke. If I don't come back the same, just know I tried." She folded the letter again, gently. Then she looked at Will. "You hugged my son for the cameras, but you never called me when he didn't come home." No one moved, not even the security near the doors. It wasn't protest, it wasn't performance. It was a mother remembering how to speak. He said the retreat would help him stop feeling broken. But afterward, he stopped feeling at all. He wouldn't eat. He wouldn't speak. He wrote on the walls at night. And then one day, he left. You said it was part of the healing process. Her eyes glistened now, not with tears, with clarity. "Is he healed now, Mr. Smith?" The silence cracked, not shattered, cracked. Like the first fault line before a quake. Someone in the media row coughed, then stopped themselves. A congressional aide lowered her tablet slowly, screen still recording. One senator, a father of 3, looked down at his shoes and did not look up again for the rest of the hearing. Will opened his mouth. No words came. He looked toward the chairman. The chairman looked away. Denzel reached into the folder again, but paused. He didn't pull anything out, not yet. Instead, he asked the only question that mattered. How many other mothers didn't get a call back? The lights didn't flicker, the microphones didn't cut, but something in the room did dim, something in the myth of recovery, something in the trust people lend to those who cry the loudest on camera. Michelle Tucker sat down. No applause followed. No comfort arrived. Only the sound of breath held too long, and the quiet, collective realization that maybe the retreat was never about healing at all. Maybe it was just a story told so well, no one thought to check the ending. Denzel waited until the quiet had settled, not like dust but like fog, thick, still, untouchable. Then he reached for a small silver USB already prepared in his palm. He didn't speak. He didn't ask for permission. He simply leaned forward and plugged it into the panel port. A screen behind him came to life with a low flicker. The image wasn't high definition. No filters, no music, just raw footage behind the scenes. The timestamp read April 17. Day 2 of the Rise with Me retreat. The video opened on a circle of teenagers sitting cross-legged on foam mats. Some leaned back on their palms, others slouched forward. In the middle sat a production crew with lighting poles and mics clipped under hoodies. One boy was speaking. His voice trembled, but his words sounded practiced. The camera then panned toward a narrow hallway. Off-screen, a voice shouted. Not the voice of a counselor, not gentle, not warm. We need more from Group C, tell them to cry deeper. Will's heading over. Another voice answered. One of the teens already broke down this morning. The one in the hoodie, he might pop again. The audio cut briefly, then resumed. The camera zoomed closer to Isaiah. He sat against the wall, shoulders tight, eyes glazed. I can't cry again, he whispered. I can't do it anymore. A staff member kneeled in front of him, blocking part of the frame. Just 5 minutes. We need the arc. If you can't cry, talk about your dad again. Isaiah shook his head. His lips moved, barely audible. I'm not broken on schedule. The video cut there, then resumed. A second clip, same day, same room, different angle. This time the voice was louder, sharper. We're going live in 20. Where's the Inglewood kid? He tested well last night. Will connects better when there's a young one crying. Another crew member replied off-screen. He's in his bunk. Says he's done. Get him out here. We already posted the teaser. No Isaiah, no narrative. The audio clicked once more. Then a third clip loaded. Grainy, low-lit. Will Smith stood outside a small prep tent. A production assistant adjusted his collar. Someone powdered his forehead. Ready when you are, a voice said. Will nodded. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply. Then asked, is the boy prepped? We think so. He's been quiet. He might crack again. Will looked into the lens, not smiling this time, just composed. Let me know when the tears start. Then the video ended. The screen went dark. No music followed, no fade-out, no cue for applause. For 5 seconds, no one spoke. Then 10, then 15. Someone exhaled too loudly and quickly stifled it. A man seated in the third row, gray suit, mid-40s, removed his earpiece and dropped it onto the floor like it had burned him. He didn't bend to pick it up. He didn't even blink. Another voice broke the air, shaky, human. I filmed that. Everyone turned. A young woman near the left wall stood halfway out of her chair. She wasn't press, not congressional, just someone who had been sitting very still until now. I was hired by the production company. Contracted, she said. I thought I was documenting healing, but the edits, they never showed what it took to get there. They never showed the parts where the kids said stop. Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. Isaiah cried the night before the shoot, real tears. He said it hurt to be seen but not heard. She paused, and we turned that into content. Her hands trembled as she sat back down. Will still hadn't spoken. His eyes stayed low, fixed on a point just past the photo of Isaiah. Not defiant, not ashamed, just suspended. One of the senators, an older man with a reputation for always staying until the end, stood up without a word. He folded his binder, slipped his glasses into the inside pocket of his jacket, and walked out. The door closed gently behind him. Denzel looked straight ahead. He hadn't moved since the video ended, but his eyes scanned the room now slowly, deliberately. This wasn't a reveal, he said. This was a reminder. A reminder that sometimes the most dangerous lie is the one told beautifully. The one scored with piano, framed with good lighting, branded as love. He paused. We didn't just witness exploitation, we choreographed it. No one argued. A junior congressman, maybe 29, muttered something under his breath. Someone beside him turned to listen, but he shook his head. I pushed the grant through. I believed in it. In the back, Michelle Tucker remained seated. Her hands now gripped the edges of her purse. Inside it, the folded letter remained untouched. She didn't look angry, just older, like grief had aged her overnight. Outside the windows, the afternoon sun was beginning to fall. The light that once bathed Will Smith in soft redemption now stretched longer, harsher across his face. It didn't make him glow. It made him visible. And visibility was no longer safety. Not here, not now. Denzel opened the folder again. This time he moved slower, not for effect, for precision. What came next didn't require framing, it required clarity. He pulled out a single sheet of paper, no more than standard printer size. Black text. No logos, no branding, just legal language. He held it up carefully before placing it on the table between them. A small camera above the chamber zoomed in. The screen behind him flickered, then displayed the document in full. Non-disclosure and media consent agreement, dated April 15. Subject, Isaiah James Tucker. The terms were cold. Dense with clauses. Language like irrevocable image rights, waiver of emotional claims, blanket usage consent. No reference to mental health clearance. No note of parental review, just a signature line. Signed, Isaiah J. Tucker. Denzel paused, letting the name echo again. Then he flipped the page. The second sheet was supposed to hold a second signature, parent or legal guardian. It was blank, not a missing file, not an oversight. The line was there. The title was typed, but no one had signed, no one had seen, no one had been asked. Denzel placed the paper flat. The room didn't gasp this time. It inhaled quietly, deeply, as though the air had thickened. One of the representatives shifted in his seat, clearing his throat. He opened his mouth to speak, then thought better of it. Another staffer reached for her phone, then stopped. Her hand hovered midair like she wasn't sure which world she now belonged to. Denzel looked up, but not at Will. At the screen. He reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a second USB. This one was labeled. Internal PR call, April 22. He plugged it in. The audio began instantly. No build-up, no music, just voices. The first was a woman, crisp, corporate. We've received several messages asking for updates on the Inglewood subject. His social metrics spiked after the clip aired. Then Will's voice. Unmistakable, familiar, but stripped of polish. He's unstable. That's what they always forget. Kids like that, they don't hold the line. They cry once, then spiral, take him out of the media plan, quietly. The woman responded, we've already pre-scheduled 2 spots with him. Morning America and a teen summit Q&A. Pull them, no more exposure. We need kids who stay on message. If this one breaks, we're holding the bag. The call ended there. No outro, no context. Just the sound of a system choosing silence over accountability. Will didn't look up. His face was still but not calm, not controlled. Frozen, like he was no longer sure which version of himself was being broadcast. A congresswoman's pen slipped from her hand and hit the desk with a sharp click. She didn't pick it up. Her knuckles whitened as she folded her hands in her lap. No one clapped. No one whispered. Even the press remained still. Denzel leaned back. His voice, when it returned, was nearly a whisper. A 16-year-old was asked to sign away his story, in exchange for what they called a full scholarship. But the school was never contacted, the funds were never transferred, and his mother never knew. He let that settle. This wasn't consent. It was containment. The words landed like slow-burning acid, not loud, not sharp, just undeniable. He looked around the room, not for validation, but for awareness. There are no laws against this, not really. There are guidelines. But when you call it a nonprofit and frame it as therapy, the rules change, the protections fade. And when you add celebrity, they vanish altogether. No one moved. Denzel looked down once more at the paper, then back at Will. You built a brand on the promise of healing, but what you bought was immunity. The kind that lets you walk away from boys who don't perform on cue. Will opened his mouth, finally, but nothing came. Behind him on the chamber wall, Isaiah's signature remained frozen on screen, slightly tilted, ink uneven, the handwriting of someone young, someone nervous, someone who still trusted the adults in the room. A young man in the gallery dropped his phone. The sound echoed across the floor. No one turned to look, because what was broken wasn't the silence. It was the belief that anyone was ever going to be held. Denzel did not speak right away. He let the silence stretch just long enough for the weight of the NDA, the audio, the boy's signature, and the absence of a mother's consent to settle into every seat. The air had changed, not just in temperature but in texture. It felt heavier now, like it resisted breath. Then, without lifting his eyes, Denzel reached into the folder one final time. This one is not from a retreat, he said. This one is from your office. He placed a printed email on the table, its subject line bold and direct. Ari, Content assets for retreat and rise, narrative timing plus raw tears. The screen behind him lit again. The email expanded to fill the space. It was from a PR consultant. The name was redacted, but the address was corporate. A signature footer linked to a firm known for packaging trauma into digestible streaming episodes. The email read, "We are confirming that for Season 2 of Retreat and Rise, Netflix requires at least 3 verified tier sequences before July, preferably authentic. Black teens are a priority for Episode 3 arc. Please advise production accordingly. Emotional authenticity sells, but we must stay within edit control. Reminder, parental signatures not required under current waiver structure." A few rows back, a black congressman exhaled hard through his nose, his voice barely above breath. "I brought this program to my district. I thought I was giving kids hope." A woman in a pale blue blazer clutched her lanyard like it could tether her to something real. Another staffer scribbled something, crossed it out, scribbled again. From the back of the chamber came a sudden voice, not sharp, just loud enough to shatter. "I wrote a false report. I got paid $400. Heads turned. A man stood, mid-30s, jacket off, sweat at the collar. They hired me in Oakland to observe, said I'd be a healing verifier. I filled out reports saying the kids were improving, but I only met them once. Some never spoke at all." He looked at Will, but not with anger, with recognition. "You looked me in the eye after a session and said, 'You're helping make history.' I didn't know it was a script." He sat back down. The room did murmur. It absorbed. This wasn't a courtroom anymore. It wasn't even a hearing. It was a slow-burning reckoning. Denzel said nothing. He didn't need to. The screen still displayed the email, words in black and white that no one could unsee. Emotional authenticity sells. It was no longer about Will's tears or Isaiah's silence. It was about the machine that turned both into metrics. Denzel leaned forward, voice low. This wasn't healing. It was content, and content has deadlines. His eyes passed over the panel. "We built a temple to pain and called it purpose. We asked children to bleed on cue so we could package their resilience into feel-good endings. We called it brave. We called it powerful." He paused. "But we never asked what happened after the credits rolled." Will's face was pale now. Not with shame, with something colder, recognition. His hand rested on the table, fingers stretched flat, every knuckle whitened. The cameras caught the tremble before he could hide it. One finger twitched, then another. Still, he said nothing. The same congressman who had whispered earlier now leaned forward. "My son applied to that retreat," he said. "He didn't get in. I remember thinking he was vulnerable enough." That was the word they used. A woman in the gallery closed her laptop, not out of protest, out of surrender. Denzel did not look triumphant. He looked tired. "Do you know what we told these boys? That being seen was the same as being heard. That tears were power. That if they opened up, they would be safe." He looked directly at Will. "And when they did, we gave them streaming contracts instead of safety. No one clapped, no one stood, no one needed to. Because the truth had arrived not like a hammer, but like a tide. Slow, rising, undeniable. The show was never about healing. It was about framing pain as progress, and selling it before anyone had a chance to recover." Denzel didn't move with urgency. He didn't need to anymore. The room had already shifted. What had begun as a spotlight had turned into a shadow, and now even that shadow felt too generous. He reached into the folder one last time and pulled out a bound packet of documents. No cover, no flourish, just line items, bank transfers, ledger entries, wire instructions. The plain architecture of a machine most people never notice until it has already consumed everything. He placed it on the table and slid it gently forward. The camera above caught the name on the first page, Inner Halo Therapy, LLC. Beneath it, a line of figures, $1.2 million, labeled as Community Wellness Disbursement, Phase II. Denzel looked up. This company received over $1 million last fiscal year from the Rise With Me Foundation. The payment was marked for post-trauma reintegration curriculum. The company's managing officer is listed as Jada Pinkett Smith. He said no more. The words did not need elaboration. They fell like cold rain in a room already shivering. One of the aides in the gallery slowly closed her laptop. Another slid a half-written notepad off her lap and let it drop into her bag. Will Smith sat perfectly still. A single breath passed between his lips, but it sounded like a verdict. Denzel's voice returned, but it was quieter now, not somber, reverent. This isn't a hearing anymore. This is a memorial. He looked around the room, eyes catching each face not to accuse, but to remember. A memorial for a boy who no longer writes. A boy who spoke once because we told him the world was listening. And when the cameras left, so did the world. His hand rested over the folder, fingers still. And it's not just Isaiah. It's the dozens more who were handed microphones instead of protection, waivers instead of care. Exposure instead of healing. He let the silence expand. This wasn't a scandal, it was a system. In the back row, a woman took off her badge and placed it gently on her seat. She stood and left without looking back. The room did not applaud. It wouldn't have felt right. On the screen, the name Isaiah James Tucker faded in once more. Just the name. No music, no highlight reel, no tearful montage. Somewhere, a camera outside caught a different image. A black teenage girl in a school uniform stood near a corner store in Crenshaw. She wore her backpack tight across both shoulders, in her hand, her phone. She was watching the hearing, not with disbelief, but with a knowing that seemed older than her years. The footage showed her face change, not in shock, in recognition. Then slowly she closed the app, tucked the phone into her pocket, and unfolded a flyer. Retreat and Rise, Summer 2025. She looked at it, read every word, then tore it clean down the middle. No rage, no drama, just quiet rejection. The pieces fluttered into a nearby trash bin. Back inside the hearing room, Denzel stood. We said we were giving these children a platform, but what we built was a stage, and what they needed was a door. He looked once more at the seat where Michelle Tucker had sat, now empty. We turned healing into a screenplay, and in doing so, we lost the plot. The chairman did not gavel. The session was never formally closed, because there was nothing left to adjourn, only the sound of chairs quietly scraping as people stood. One by one, slowly, as if leaving church after a funeral with no hymns, only memory. Outside, the sun was beginning to set, the kind of light that makes everything golden just before it disappears. And somewhere in a neighborhood that rarely makes the news, a mother sat at her kitchen table. One light on, one empty plate still warm, waiting not for answers, just for silence, because sometimes that's all that's left when the story ends. And no one dares lay flowers.